Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video from the SFN and NeuroKids Neuroscience class. Today we're going to talk about hormones and homeostasis in neuroscience. So before we start, let's review a very key term, homeostasis, which means a state of balance in the body. As you may remember from previous videos, a major part of the brain responsible for keeping our body in homeostasis is the hypothalamus, which regulates the production of hormones to control bodily functions like our heart rate. Let's consider our body temperature, which should normally stay around 37 degrees Celsius in a human. When our body starts to heat up or rise above this set point, our hypothalamus will trigger a response to cool down our bodies back to the normal body temperature, a response such as sweating. Vice versa, when our body starts to cool down, our hypothalamus will alert the body to start shivering as a way to produce more body heat and raise the core temperature back to the set point. This process is an example of a negative feedback loop, which is a very important term in biology, especially when we're dealing with hormones. Essentially, with a negative feedback loop, whenever there is a stimulus that moves the body away from a certain set point, a response will be triggered to change the stimulus to be back to the set point. Now let's look more closely at the hypothalamus, which controls the production and release of hormones by communicating with the pituitary gland. The posterior pituitary gland is responsible for releasing two hormones, vasopressin and oxytocin. Vasopressin is also known as the antidiuretic hormone, which is released when our blood volume is low or doesn't have enough water. Vasopressin can increase the blood volume by increasing the water reabsorption in the kidneys, meaning that the kidneys will excrete less water in your urine, allowing more water to remain or be reabsorbed into your body. Then, vasopressin also constricts the blood vessels, called vasoconstriction, which increases your blood pressure. You can imagine how, if your blood volume was originally low and thus your blood distribution throughout your body wasn't as efficient as it should be, raising the blood pressure and thus increasing the rate of blood distribution could be advantageous to your body. And now we're going to move on to the second hormone produced by the posterior pituitary gland, which is oxytocin. One of the many roles of oxytocin is to increase uterine contractions during labor, but it also has many other functions in the body. Oxytocin is considered the love hormone because it is released when people snuggle or bond socially. Studies have even found that treating children with ASD, or autism spectrum disorder, treating them with oxytocin has improved their social interactions in many cases because those children's baseline oxytocin levels were very low. And again, oxytocin is related to social communication, which is often impaired in ASD. Again, these two hormones are released from the posterior pituitary gland. Now let's look at the anterior pituitary gland, which releases 7 different hormones, 5 of which are considered tropic. Tropic hormones don't target cells or organs, but rather target endocrine glands. What does that mean? Well, a tropic hormone will stimulate a gland to produce another hormone that will then have an effect on actual cells and organs, as opposed to the tropic hormone directly having an effect on the final target group of cells. Because the anterior pituitary releases so many hormones, we won't go over all of them in this video, but we will look at a few, the first of which are LH and FSH. So LH stands for luteinizing hormone, and FSH stands for follicle stimulating hormone. And in their hormonal loops or cycles, GnRH, which stands for gonadotropin releasing hormone, is also relevant, and we'll talk about why it's relevant in just a second. So in males, FSH stimulates the production of sperm, while LH stimulates the production of testosterone. In females, FSH and LH trigger ovulation and control the hormones produced by the ovaries based on which part of the ovular cycle the female is currently in. And one of these hormones, of course, the main is estrogen. So to prevent the level of hormones from overwhelming the body, the more testosterone or estrogen that is produced, the less LH and FSH will be released, so that the levels of testosterone and estrogen aren't exceedingly high. Additionally, the levels of GnRH, or gonadotropin releasing hormone, will also start to decrease, as you can see from the arrow with the negative sign there. GnRH is a tropic hormone because it stimulates other glands to release more hormones instead of it acting directly on the ultimate target cells, right? So GnRH acts on LH and FSH, which then produce the actual physiological change. And now we're not going to delve into the LH and FSH hormonal cycles any more in depth, but the brain beat doesn't focus on the very specifics of these hormones from what I've seen, because it starts to become a lot less related on neuroscience and a lot more on reproductive cycles. However, if you want to delve more into the LH and FSH cycles, I would definitely just go check out Campbell's biology on those, or check out the videos that I linked at the end of the presentation. So now we're going to cover two more important hormones, which are leptin and ghrelin, which control our appetite and sense of hunger. When our stomach is empty, the gastrointestinal tract will release the hormone ghrelin, which will travel to the hypothalamus to activate its hunger circuits and alert our body that we must search and eat food to satisfy our appetite. Then, when the stomach starts to become full, ghrelin production will decrease, and thus our desire to eat will also decrease. Leptin has the opposite effect, and so it peaks when we're full, but declines when our stomach empties and when it's time to eat. So why? Leptin is actually produced by our fat cells when the fat stores are large. So you can imagine that as you're eating up and filling up those fat stores, leptin levels are rising, alerting us to stop eating. And in the next video, we're going to talk about the body's response to stress, specifically which hormones are released and how they function.